Are we ready?
Mhm.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wine with Weeda. On today's episode, I am with the wonderful Dave Jereb from MoveAbout Therapy Service, who he is an occupational therapist. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good morning, Rita. I am great. So great.
It's so good to have you on Wine with Weeda to share your wonderful wisdom and amazing thoughts with children and supporting their development.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on and thanks for bearing with me through some technical difficulties at the start, but we got there. We
We got there, definitely.
survived.
It's all about trial and error, isn't it?
It is. It is. We kept
Yeah.
regulated throughout the whole process, and
I'm
now we've
loving the
reached our
slide of
outcome.
occupational therapy terms coming in. Oh, what a way to start a good, beautiful morning. Dave, tell me, I feel with our clients that we see, the young ones, the pediatricians, once they've seen a pediatrician for an assessment, they suggest go see a speech pathologist and then go see an occupational therapist. Now, parents naturally know speech pathologists help with the talking, but what does an occupational therapist do? They're quite confused and they're just not sure. So please give me the rundown of what an OT is and how we can support young ones with their development.
Yeah, great question. Because I think that sometimes OTs are quite confused and have trouble explaining this. So it is always a challenge because OTs do a lot of things. We actually
Mm,
get in and we can work with lots of different populations, from aged care to mental health to rehab to kids, and a lot more beyond that. So yeah, it's a tough thing to ask. Even within pediatrics, there's quite a bunch that we might do. So I always say occupational therapists work with people's occupations. So your occupations are what occupies your time. So we're not getting kids into child labor, not that sort of occupations, but what occupies your time. They have occupations around being a son or a daughter, a play friend. They have social occupations. They have school occupations, those work roles around getting your work done and completed and handwriting, those sort of things. So there's a lot of different roles kids have, occupational roles that kids have that OTs can support them with. And so, all right, so basically that's everything, right? Well, let's get a little more specific. I would say in pediatrics, there's two types of OTs that people think about. There are OTs that are more top down, and so they're more focused on skills and practicing skills and working through skills. So if handwriting is the challenge, they might be practicing letter formation or developing finger strength. Then there's more bottom up OTs, and so they're looking at how can we set up the body to be able to be more adaptable across a range of different things. So often they're the ones that get called SIOTs or sensory OTs, or bottom up is another way people talk about it. And I guess the criticism of the top down OTs is that they're really not getting to the root of the problem if they're just focused at the level of skill. The criticism of the bottom up OTs is that they never get to function, they never get to skill. And so that's important to know when you're a family looking for an OT, is finding the one that's the right fit for me. And so some kids, things are going pretty well and they really just do need to develop the strategies of forming their letters. They just haven't really learned that, so they have to do that. They're not the kids that tend to end up in my practice, but
Mm,
they're out there, and they might need half an hour for whatever frequency that therapist needs. We tend to see the kids that have challenges in behavior, challenges in regulation. Their bodies might not be stable, so you need to have a stable base to be able to then have that mobility in the more fine motor aspects. So a handwriting kids might still end up with us if they don't really have great core strength. They maybe have some challenges with attention and regulation. And so they really do need work at other places rather than just where pen hits paper. However, I think OTs should be doing both. So they shouldn't
yeah.
be a top down or a bottom up. They should be doing both. They should be looking holistically. We should have goals that are rooted in function and their occupation, and we should be able to look at how do we set up the body to be able to do that as easily as possible. And then in terms of strategies, it might be clinic based or home based, the things people have to think about. And so it's how important is the clinic and the resources within that clinic to be able to work on the areas we need to work on. How important is it to do it within the actual task? Well, to learn a specific task, it's great to do it in the natural context. And we see the NDIS is moving to pushing a lot more of natural environments in home. And I think there's a lot of power to doing that. In saying that, though, I think clinics are set up to be able to give larger than everyday life opportunities to extend and grow and build strength and regulation and ideation in their planning. And so there's definitely an important role for clinics. What clinics need to do, and therapists in clinics, they need to make sure, this is sort of our key phrase at MoveAbout, we support the people who support the kids. So the goal of OT is not to be good at OT. Whether you're in the home or in the clinic, it's not about being good in my OT session. It's about supporting them to be engaged and successful in their life. And so that's where it's really important that therapy isn't just the therapy, the direct treatment. It's also education and consultation. So supporting the people to support the kids, helping the families understand more about their child from the knowledge we have, and giving them strategies to support them in those occupational roles. That's where, I feel like I'm in clinic-based most of the time, but I really am helping families work at that root point of function and engagement and whatever it is in daily life. I still find that's valuable. And I also find that I tend to get more attention from the families when they're out of their busy life. But yeah, so you got to do both, top down, bottom up, have functional goals and set up the body to be able to do that task and support the people who support the kids.
You said some really beautiful phrases there. Functional, which is what I'm a big advocate for, setting up functional goals for a child, but also supporting supporting people to support the children. And I always find I love working with occupational therapists and other allied health professionals because the quality of my work just gets better when I work collectively with OOTs, especially when we're targeting that bottom-up approach. Now, when I meet a client, I would say, okay, let's consult with an OT to work on some regulation or some sensory needs. Parents are quite confused with that because it's unfamiliar terminology. Could you give an insight into what that means so a parent can understand?
Sure, I can. Yeah, it's really important. So, and finally, as a side note around that sensory piece, some people say that sensory integration is controversial. Some people might hear, that sensory stuff is sensory integration is not at all controversial. It's just common sense. There's a type of therapy called sensory integration treatment. Now, we're happy to have that discussion. Is that controversial? Not really. But should it be used with certain populations, and is it growing a body of evidence? Sure, we can talk about that with that treatment approach. But in terms of sensory integration, it's basic neuroscience and common sense. So we take in information from our senses, we use it to make a plan, and then our body performs that plan. Our senses give us information about what's available in the world around us and what I need to do in the task in front of me. They help us read other people's cues and check that our cues that we've delivered socially have been read. This is where I think later we can chat about, I think OTs have a real role in communication, particularly around that pre-speaking element, where it's all about reading and conveying through the sensation and using our motor plans to plan our actions for gesture. Those things are all really relevant and overlap with OTs, because OTs help us understand how we use our senses to read the world and use that information to plan our actions. Our senses also help us wake our bodies up and calm our bodies down. So, I always, when I'm teaching, I often find that I say, who has a shower in the morning to wake themselves up? And half the room puts up their hands. And then I say, well, who has a shower in the evening to calm themselves down? Half the room puts up their hand. Who does both? It's usually about 8 people do both. And that's the thing. It's not that showering is just about changing our state of regulation. No, of course, it's about getting clean and all of those things. But we all know that, for me, it's harder to get started. If I'm going to the airport and I have to get up early and I say, I'll skip the shower, it takes me 20 minutes longer to get out of the house, because that's part of my routine that wakes my brain up. So there are sensory things that wake our body up and calm our bodies down. And so that's called regulation. That's called sensory regulation. But in regulation, we wake ourselves up and calm ourselves down through different aspects of sensation, emotionality, like a range of different things. So that was the sensory piece. Was there one other piece to it that I missed?
Also
what were we talking about?
understanding the We're talking about,
the
so
regulation.
sensory and regulation. So those 2 points. I wanted
Yeah.
to touch so that parents hear the term over-regulated and under-regulated, and they're quite confused between the two. Now, someone actually
Mm,
told me many years ago, imagine driving and it's raining, it's quite heavy with rain, your windscreen wipers are on and the music is loud and you can't reverse park because there's too many sensory inputs, and
mm.
therefore I am I'm over-regulated, and therefore I need to turn off the music and tell everyone to be quiet so I can complete the task. Is that how you would describe overly regulated?
So can I just tweak the term? I probably wouldn't say over-regulated because that sounds like
Mm,
you're regulating really good. So regulating is your
mhm,
ability to adjust, to wake your body up or calm your body down. So, like I liked your scenario where basically you're over responding, or you're flipping your lid. You're outside of your ideal window of
mm.
tolerance, your just right zone. Can I talk you through a scenario of sort of like a
Yeah, go
typical
for
day
it.
for me that I think really goes through these things? So I wake up in the morning. I am sleepy. As we talked about, I need a shower to wake up in the morning. That really helps. I have a coffee. Now, in the morning, though, I am in, say, you have a low zone, a just right or an optimal range, and then a high zone. That's sort of a really simplistic way to think about how we move these levels. You want to be in that just right zone. There's points where you're too low to think and reason, points where you're too reactive to think and
Mm,
reason. And I'm in the low zone, and probably in even my just right zone is more narrow. So even though I'm in the low zone, I'm more likely to snap at you if you start talking at me too much. I'm like, I can't talk, can't think, need my coffee, those sort of things. And I remember this one time that I was like, oh, I'm really struggling. I need a Barocca as well as my coffee. And I got my coffee, got the water for the Barocca, went and got the Barocca and put it in the coffee. And I was
oh,
like, it's close, but not quite right, right? Because my brain hadn't woken up to the stage that I could access the thinking and reasoning parts of the brain, which is the cortex. That's the top part. So you sort of have to wake up to that. And that's where thinking and reasoning is. It's also where language is. And that's where you are saying, just hold on, can't talk. Just let me get my coffee, let me have a shower, then we'll talk about what we're doing today. Right. So that
mhm,
low zone's not great for thinking and reasoning. Then I get in my car, maybe I'm still a bit low, so I might push on the steering wheel and have a bit of a stretch. Maybe I turn the music up nice and loud and I start rocking out to AC/DC. That wakes me up. I'm off. I'm good. I'm out for the day, right? And I do a job that I jump and crash and crawl and climb and swing for a living. I'm what we might call a seeker. So I like movement. If I have to get stuck at my desk, it does turn me into a bit of an afternoon slug. Movement is
oh,
good for
yeah.
me, not good for everyone. If I, maybe I have a bit of a dip after lunch and I have a bit of a low period, but I'm able to stay in that just right, that optimal zone, the window of tolerance, some people talk about it as. But I can stay in that just right zone or that optimal zone most of the day because I have a fairly adaptable nervous system. If at the end of the day I'm running late and I go out to the car and the street lights are flickering and there's funny noises and I drop my keys and I get in the car and I turn the ignition on and I'm blasted with AC/DC at full volume because I left it on where I needed it in the
Mm,
morning was not where I needed it now. I'm at the top of my threshold and that flips my lid and I panic and turn the ignition off. So turning the ignition off solved the problem, but it was not a very good idea in my car, right? So I
mm,
can't turn the volume down when the ignition's off. So I'm going to have to get blasted again. But what it was a small version of me going into flight, going into escape. So when you flip your lid, when you're in that high zone, you're either going to fight or flee. You're in a dark alley and someone approaches you to attack you. You're going to fight them off or you're going to flee to get away from it. I flipped my lid and briefly went into flight and turned off the ignition. I got rid of the problem. So I wasn't thinking, just like in your scenario, that when all those things are happening, it's really hard to access your cortex to be able to plan just to do a simple action you might have done 100 times before of
mm,
planning that reverse park. But it's not the end of the world. I take a deep breath. I might push on the steering wheel here to feel a bit grounded and I make a quick plan. I'm going to turn it on, turn it down. And when I do that, I get blasted for a second, but I'm able to organize enough to turn it down and it's gone. I can take another breath, calm down a little bit, drive home and do my evening routine to get nice and calm for bed that evening. Now, if my
mm.
wife had at that moment said to me, Dave, let's chat about the budget, I'd be like, can't talk, right? So you can't
Tax.
talk and think and reason in that low zone. You can't talk and think and reason in that high zone. You want to be within that optimal range. And that's really important. That's really important too when we've got kids that have tantrums or meltdowns.
Mm,
Cut out the language, regain regulation. Also, don't just dip back into regulation, because we sometimes dip back into regulation. There's a bit of a gray zone where we're not dysregulated, but we're also not calm and regulated. And so the kid stops flailing and they get to this point and we're like, all right, now say sorry and tell me why you did that. And then boom, we're off again.
Yeah.
Because we're still up there. Sink right down into regulation before you want to discuss it and talk through it. If I just point out a couple of things there. One, you want to be in that optimal range. Too low, you can't think and reason, use language. Too high, same thing. There are different things that wake our body up and calm our body down. I have different needs to you. I talked about I need a shower to wake up. Some people need it to calm down. Sometimes the same thing is good for us at some times and not at other times. So the music was great for waking me up in the morning. It was terrible when I was high and at my threshold. Things like pushing and pulling, proprioception, input to your muscles and joints, almost always have a centering effect. So they almost always work. We saw in these scenarios, I pushed on the steering wheel to wake up in the morning, and I also did it to feel calm and grounded. So there are different things with our senses. Often movement in a straight line, like linear movement in a straight line, or bouncing or rhythmic movement, tends to be organizing, tends to be calming, tends to be centering. Irregular, crazy run around tends to rev us up. So there's all these different aspects. In general, using our muscles against resistance, using our breath and getting long, deep breaths, deep pressure touch, hugs and squeezes, and movement that's a bit more linear and rhythmic. They tend to be the things that are sort of more organizing. And I say organizing rather than calming down, because the goal is not to be calm. The goal is to be organized and ready for what you need to do. We want to be calm for bed, and there's certain strategies for that, but they're sort of really good, the big guns that we can use to help us feel organized. Was that okay?
Yeah, I love that. I really love that analogy, because I'm actually thinking of myself and those high triggers, but also when I'm in that low zone, but also working with clients. When I arrive to a therapy session and they're really upset, well, we really won't have that optimal therapy time, because we need to work on regulating them back to an optimal moment for them. And it's about what strategies can I implement? And you said it perfectly. Just stop talking. Stop talking. Calm down with the child, follow their lead, and let the session follow itself, but rather than working on specific communication strategies when they're at that peak. That was beautifully explained. How can parents, and it's so abstract, but what current concerns would you notice with young children with those sensory needs, and as a result for us to refer on to OT?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, OTs could be involved when there's an impact in function in daily life. So if there's something in their daily life that isn't going right, it might be an OT related thing. To bring it further down, why would it be an OT related thing? If there's something around attention or regulation, usually an OT has a lot of good information about tuning in and paying attention, or if the kid needs to wake their bodies up to pay attention or calm their bodies down to get organized and engage and learn. Clumsiness, so coordination difficulties. If kids are unstable in their bodies or having trouble with coordination, that is generally an OT related things. And then there are things around, like the obvious school related things like handwriting, things like potentially reading could be something that could overlap between a variety of different professions, but OTs do look at visual perceptual elements of that. And so there's a whole bunch of pieces to that. But if there's something around how the kid is reading or how the kid is writing, how they're getting the spatial elements of the shapes, like copying a shape and you're like, that looks very different. And again, these things are developmental. So in a preschooler, there's a much wider range. And then as you get to school, so a teacher might point these things out and have a chat to you about it, or a speechy. I would say the big ones from speech that speechies are saying I need an OT are around regulation. If the kid is not able to be in a place where they're calm and grounded and connected to learn, that's often an OT thing. And then the coordination is a big piece too. So if their posture is unstable and they can't plan their actions and coordinate left and right, that's a big sign too.
Those behaviors you mentioned, those characteristics you mentioned before, a lot of people will identify them as challenging behaviors rather than understanding the reasons why the child is displaying that behavior. And I know I wanted to talk about it later, but I'm just so tempted. Your book, Challenging the Story, really discusses the importance of understanding a child's behavior in order to support their learning. And you mentioned this before, strength-based approach with understanding a child's behavior to make it a positive situation rather than a negative situation. Could you elaborate into that a bit?
Yeah. So I like to get a bit scientific with behavior, not to make people tune out, but just to simplify it and go, a behavior is just an action, anything you do. It's like there's a definition from Webster's dictionary. It's like anything an organism does or responds to stimulus or something like that. But basically, it's just what we do. And I take the judgment out of it. So it's not good or bad behavior. It's just every behavior is just what it is in and of itself. It serves a purpose. It's being done for a
Mm,
reason. So it might be a behavior you don't want to see. It's a behavior that you're struggling with. It's funny that I keep always going to you're struggling with. When I talk about challenging behaviors, often it's challenging for me or challenging
mm.
for the parent or the teacher. It's often also challenging for the child, but recognizing that it's not just on the child and that we have a role in that too. And probably we have a bigger role because we have access to our thinking and reasoning brain a lot more than that child probably does. And actually, the part that they really need to reason, their prefrontal cortex,
Mm.
isn't fully developed until they're 25 to 30. So we have that. So it's our job to actually see if we can set up the environment, the activity to be more supportive for them. And they'll have a role too. But behavior is just, it's the action. We need to move away from the what and trying to just control and get compliance and move to the why it's happening so we can support the child so they don't need to use that behavior that's challenging for them and us. And so they can choose other options or alternatives so that they don't need that. In terms of where were we? In terms of learning
Yeah,
and
learning. So people may assume that a child's their behavior is a negative, but well, how can we
oh,
change it to strengthen
yeah.
the approach through their behavior?
Yeah, so and you mentioned strengths based. I used to struggle with the term strengths based way back in the day when it started to become popular. I was like, parents don't come to me to work on strengths. They want to work on the struggles and like they're doing the strengths, but they need to get better at the things that are hard. And what I've come to understand is that do you choose a job that's surrounded about, that relates to all the things that you're not very good at? No, I'm an
No.
OT because I'm playful, I'm engaging, I'm good at connecting. I enjoy that piece. I find it meaningful. I like thinking and reasoning and problems. Like, there's a reason why I didn't pursue a career in professional basketball, right? I'm 5'4". It wasn't going to fly. I can do it well enough to have fun in the backyard, but it would not be fun to try and pursue it as a profession. And yet for kids, we just focus on the things that are hard. All right, they've got to learn them. School, there's things you got to do, and you're not going to enjoy things until you're competent at them. So you've got to learn hard stuff. What I will say is if we want to actually get change and see what we want, we need to realize, let's pull it to the neuro. And the neuro is, if it's meaningful to you, you will connect the neurons better. Your brain will make stronger connections if it means something to you, if it's important to you, if you enjoy it, if it's fun. Actually, the brain makes better, like a lot better. I'm not talking twice better. I'm talking tens or dozens or hundreds of times better than if you try and learn boring stuff. If it's
Hmm.
meaningful to you and you can attach it to things you know and care about. So never do handwriting practice. At least stick a bloody Spider-Man sticker on it and make it Spider-Man handwriting. But I think we can be more creative than that. Adding meaning and making sure that it's coming from a place of meaning and that they feel successful in it too. That's the other piece. If you don't feel successful, it's really hard to be motivated. We want to be pitching work within a zone. There's a couple of different ways we explain it. The zone of proximal development's an old psychological way of phrasing it. OTs talk about the just right challenge. That's from Gene Ayres. But that just right challenge is really, it's not so boring that you fall asleep and you're unmotivated, and it's not so challenging that you're overwhelmed and you don't want to give it a go. This gap between boredom and anxiety, where you feel challenged and you're stretching yourself, that's when you're going to be motivated most and that you feel good about it. And if it's meaningful and you feel good, you're going to learn it better. So look, we can't change the whole curriculum to be a Pokemon
Mm.
curriculum, although for some kids we would see massive changes in maths and English and in reading, literacy, if we switch to their interest. There's a reason why our kids' bookshelves are full of Pokemon readers and Minecraft readers, right?
Minecraft,
Because they're motivating, and you can get through those things when you're engaging in what's meaningful for them, and when you're building on their strength at that just right challenge. It's sound neuroscience. I know we sometimes people think they're catering or giving in, and it's like, what are you trying to get? The goal is actually to help this kid learn, to help this kid be a successful reader, to help this kid understand maths concepts. And the neuro is sound. If we make it meaningful and we build on their strengths, then we can help pull that other stuff up with it. It's just the best way to do it. And we can still
You
work on
nailed
the
it.
areas of challenge.
You nailed that, Dave. I love it, because it's all about, you said that key word, connection. If we don't have a meaningful connection with a child, how can we achieve the treatment goals that we want to achieve, but also build the trusting relationship so the child can continue to develop their goals with you? And I feel you also sparked a really interesting point, the curriculum. If we really change the curriculum or amended the curriculum to focus on a child's interests, we will have better outcomes and better participation in the activities as well. Love it. Thank you. That's great.
No problems. I mean, connection
Yeah.
is something we haven't chatted about. And is it okay if I chat a little bit
Yeah,
about
go
that?
for it. Because I believe in my business, I believe connection creates communication. And then when you connect at a child's level, you follow their lead, you imitate them, and you just build that beautiful, flourishing relationship. The world is your oyster with that child. You can achieve many goals because you have that initial foundation of trust and a beautiful rapport. And it's so and I believe in our field, we develop that through play. Lots of play-based learning. And I want to change the narrative and show parents this is how we start the therapy process to achieve the goal of talking for your child. And parents come to the clinic expecting the child to talk, but it's really, we have to go way back to establish that connection first to then get to the long-term goal of talking.
Yeah. And it all starts with connection. Connection is everything. And again, because one of my passions is that there are so many things I talk about in OT, and speech probably has some of these too, that feel a bit fluffy, feel a bit soft, feel a bit nice, too nice to be useful. Things like connection, things like play, are things that people are really hesitant to move forward in, because they feel like, well, if it's fun, it can't be. We learn in our days of tough love that it's got to be hard work to actually be effective. And it's not quite right. I mean, there's value in hard work, but connection is the key. And so if you'll forgive me, I'm going to try and make these fluffy things again a little more rooted in the science. And so the neuroscience of connection is unbelievable. So anyone, when we're worried about something, when we're anxious about something, when we're stressed about something, we start to flip our lid, right? We start to do this piece where we get towards our high zone. And our amygdala, our fear brain, starts going. So when kids are constantly approaching things that are hard for them, and that might be just turning up to the table when I'm a picky eater, it might be starting to do speech therapy when I don't feel like a good talker, it might be reading in front of the class, it could be a range of different things. When we get faced with this thing we find hard, our fear brain starts to go off, which then makes us go into that higher zone or on the edge of it, so they might not be fleeing or fighting, but they're in the gray zone where that's really there, and they're starting to lose access to their lid, their thinking and reasoning brain. We really need them to be calm and organized and connected in order to think and reason. And the cool thing, when we connect and engage, like truly meaningfully connect, what happens is the brain gets washed with oxytocin. So that's the love drug, right? We get it in mothers in feeding, that infant mother bond that you get, but dads can get it too. And you can get it with your dog if it's that sort of warm connection through compassion or connection, fun, joy, but just that being present and connected. The brain gets washed with oxytocin, and oxytocin says, hey, amygdala, hey, fear brain, you're not needed. So you can rest, and now I can access my thinking and reasoning brain. And none more so than for autistic kids. So we know that the brains of autistic people go off like a 5-alarm fire with their amygdala related to eye contact, which is often associated with that connection piece. And in some therapies, forced, which it should never be. I'm just going to use this as a platform to say,
No, eye
you're doing
contact is never
the
a goal.
wrong thing. If you are forcing it, you're going to make it less likely to happen from the inside out. I do think I'm a bit on the fence about eye contact as a goal. Shared social connection, visual referencing are really helpful in engagement. So if a parent, wants to work on that, as long as we're trying to woo it out of them so that they're driven to look and interested and caring and loving, we're washing their brains with oxytocin so the amygdala stays calm. I have had kids I've worked with that I've been there the first time they've cupped their parents' face in their hands and looked at them like they've seen them for the first time. Like, that's a powerful moment, but you can't force that. You will make them not want to be with you. Oxytocin connection sets the brain up to be open to engage and to be open to learn. It just sets everything up to make that process easier. So it's not fluffy. Connection has to be the first step. And we often talk about you've got to be regulated to connect and learn and do all these things. And that's true. A lot of these models we have start with regulation at the bottom of the pyramid. The DIR floor tone model has regulation and interest in the world. Sensory integration model has regulation of the different senses of the core foundation. But the reality of it is, if you can connect, that's co-regulation. And that connection also makes you less likely to dysregulate. It sets the brain up to say, hey, I'm safe and connected. You don't need to mobilize. You don't need to fight or flee. You don't need to shut down and disconnect. And then the child is ready to engage and be social, ready to learn, ready to talk, ready to, if I can add one more thing on a speech therapist
absolutely,
podcast,
go for it.
I try and steer those
it's about
parents
allied
to
health here.
but it's a speechy thing. But I say I'm not even sure that speech can be your goal. I guess it's important to a parent, but communicating is first and foremost the key. And whether that's through speech or whether that's through visuals or whether that's through gestures or something else, the first stage is we want them to be able to communicate their inner world, get that back and forwards interaction. And from a lot of our kids, speech will come, but setting these stages up through connection and engagement is really a key aspect to that. And it sets the stage for learning how to say the words and letters and sounds correctly too.
Yeah, I love this, Dave. And I feel what you do makes the quality of the work better for me as a therapist. But we speak in the same language here. In order to achieve beautiful relationships and in my field, communication, we need to connect. And you described that perfectly. I loved it. So thank you. Thank you.
No problems.
Now, the piece I want to talk about, and you can see I've actually quite enjoyed the book just through all the folding. What a fabulous book you've created, challenging the story. So some points I want to mention first. Such an easy read, incredibly relatable. So there's a character called Jenny. I'm Jenny most of the time. And Mrs. Who. Mrs. Who is the character that we refer to as therapists or as parents or even teachers with what do we do with those challenging behaviors that we see in our classroom with our clients. And Dave, you really depicted three main characters that we see. So such as an autistic child, a behavior child, and also I think there was the Minecraft child was the
Here's some learning
challenging behavior,
challenges.
learning challenges.
Yeah.
Then the autistic one that would use their body to express themselves, but that some children would see that as rough. There was one more, I just can't remember the third one.
And Henry has some behaviors related to sensory sensitivities and reactivity.
Yeah, that's the third one. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I highly recommend all allied health, working pediatrics and teachers to have a read because it definitely gives you a different perspective, particularly with how, and parents too, sorry, and how we, with how we navigate behaviors with children. So tell me, what was your why for this book?
I've been doing this for more than 20 years. We've had MoveAbout Therapy Services for more than 16 years. We've got 3 clinics, Sydney, Central Coast, Newcastle. We've got a lot of therapists now. I've got about 25 to 30 therapists working with me in an admin team, but we've had lots more across those 16 years. I got to learn from some great mentors in the US when I worked there for 5 years before that. And I just had some great, rich learning that I didn't realize some of the things that I thought was common sense other
Mm.
people were wowed with. And so when I would teach my new team members, even if they'd work somewhere else, or when I was doing mentoring with someone external to MoveAbout or doing a training, and I would say things like, we've got to look at the behavior objectively. They go, yeah, okay. And then I would give a scenario about getting called into a preschool because the child's attacking other kids. And I'd be like, all right, well, that's a little bit subjective. What could we say other than attacking? It's like, well, hitting. It's like, okay, closer. And then I'd be like, if we really want to get scientific here, it's kind of moving the hand in the direction of the other kid's face. Like, and people think that's crazy. And I wouldn't say that actually at the start. I would just go in and observe. But too often I would go in and observe in a preschool, and I would see that this kid that I've been working with who had challenges engaging and relating and were in their own world, I'd worked with the family and now they were interested in other people and they wanted to relate. And then I would see them in the classroom go up to another kid and reach their hand at their face. But I would see that they were smiling, they were
Mm.
soft, they were calm, they were relaxed, they were trying to connect.
Connect.
Now, it didn't feel like connection to the other kid. There was a dirty big hand coming at their face. And I always talk about, like when you have your baby on your lap, a little 5-month-old, and it's batting at your face and you gobble its hands, and it's gorgeous, right? Less gorgeous as the kid gets bigger.
Bigger.
And those kids often can't communicate. They can't plan their actions. They're clumsy with the way that they do it. But reframing that for people, it's a completely different management plan. It's about being present and coaching in the moment. It's about modeling ways to approach and connect that aren't going to feel threatening. It's about helping other kids understand the intentions so that they're not immediately pulling away and running away. There are other kids where it might be that they're focused on their toys and someone reaches for a toy and they feel threatened because of light touch or sound or the visual appearing to them. That's a defensive response. Again, it's completely
Mm.
different to attacking, right? It just needs a different plan to manage
Perspective.
it. So when we
Mm.
when we pull back and we look at it objectively, we look at the what objectively, we look at how it's being done, then we can start to understand why, and we can start to develop strategies that support that child to be successful based on why they're doing it and their profile, rather than just trying to control the what, which never feels good to anyone. And so I would be telling these things and people's drawers would drop. And I'm like, this is like just what we learned. This is, isn't it? But it wasn't. It was, I'd
Mm.
combined a few different things. And so the more I did that and the more I saw that people really resonated with it, I was like, I think I should write some of this down and share it with people. And for me, meaning is everything. I also think throughout history, we learned through story, right? And then there was a point in history that we went, no, let's stop the story and let's just do boring statistics and information
Mm.
and data. And so all our learning at uni is mostly data and then the odd case study and then a whole
Evidence.
bunch of
Mm.
data. And I was like, why don't we do it through story? And I had read some business books that were written as a story. And so challenging the story, a surprisingly simple approach to supporting children with challenging behaviors, is written as a story. So you learn the lessons through the storyline. At the end of each chapter, I have a reflection point where I
Reflective
break
point, which I
script.
loved. That
Yeah.
part was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people say that was actually a real afterthought. I have to be honest. Because I wanted the story. I wanted people to immerse themselves in the story and just sort of integrate that through meaning. And then someone said, I think you should just tie it up at the end of each chapter. And so I did that where I break script and say, hey, in case you missed it, here's the point of this story in one
Yeah, I
paragraph.
love
Really
that's
simple.
one of my favorite parts of the book. It's like, yep, I've read the
Huh.
story. I understand what Mrs. Who was going on about and Jenny's feelings when how she was so confused. But the reflective point was such a lovely way with how can I apply this clinically and even how can I apply it
Mm,
with my own children? Like,
yeah.
now I understand I need to. I think he even had a beautiful point where consequences are a misunderstanding of punishment or something like that phrase that we need
It
to
was
reframe what
so that
consequences are.
I think the phrase you're talking about is today's consequence of tomorrow's antecedents. And so what that means,
Yes,
is
that's
that
the one.
right?
Yeah.
And so we often
Yeah,
think
I'm
of
just gonna say
consequences
yeah,
as
we go, just
punishment.
popped up.
Ah, there you go. Look at
There
that.
you go.
So we look at the behavior objectively. The antecedent is what led up to it, and then the consequences are what typically happens after it. Not how do we punish them? That is a consequence, but what naturally happens if the kids gets asked to read and they feel bad at reading and they go blah 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 blah, and you say right, get out. Well, the
Mm,
consequence is yes, they got into trouble and sent out, and there's a breach in that relationship. But actually, the consequence is they didn't have to show they couldn't read to their friends.
mm,
So is that more likely to make them go blah blah blah, or less likely? It's possibly going to make it more likely to go blah 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 because even though they don't like getting in trouble, they don't want their friends to think they're dumb because they can't read. I don't think that, but that's their perception.
That's
And
the
so
perception, yeah.
they were able to avoid it. I had a kid, I shouldn't laugh, this is so terrible, but I had a kid who was a really big guy, and he was tipping the kid with CP out of his wheelchair and then laughing hysterically as people came running to deal with it. And I got invited into the school to deal with this behavior, this aggressive behavior. And it was that they didn't give him any emotional expression through the rest of the week because they didn't want to set him off. He didn't get set off. He was a really gentle giant. The only time they gave him emotional expression was when he tipped the kid out of the wheelchair. They lit up like a light and sound toy. They were so entertaining. And so the consequence of tipping the kid over
You got
was
attention.
everyone was hysterical. And so for that, I just said, we just got to give him more expression. So they'd throw a gym ball with him and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And you know what? From that day, he never did it again because it filled his cup. So it was about, if you can figure out the why, sometimes it is that quick and it feels better. It just feels right when you can hit the nail on the head rather than trying to control a behavior but not understanding the origin. There's always a reason. I don't believe that there's any kids that are inherently naughty. They're getting something out of it. And you mentioned attention. A lot of people say, well, they're just doing it for attention. It's like, well, then that's a cup that needs to be filled. Kim Barthel often talks about, well, it's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking.
Connection seeking. Yeah.
So
I've
how
heard of
can they
that
get
phrase.
it in the right way? When's the right time to do it? How can you get them to say, I need a break. I need to connect for a little bit. And again, it takes a very short time to fill that cup of connection to, again, wash the brain with oxytocin, help it feel safe and ready to learn. I would love it if teachers, parents, just when they greeted kids, spent 10 seconds to just get down on their level and like truly connect and say, hey, it's great to see you. That's my one thing. And it's such a low bar, but it's my one thing of a morning. When I say goodbye to my kids, I say, see you, buddy. And I wait and I linger until they look up and we get that connection. That's that gushy connection. I always say you need to connect long enough that it would be uncomfortable with someone you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Because then it gets that sort of, it reaches that level of intimacy that it would be weird to do that with the checkout person at Coles.
Thank you for scanning my rewards card. Have a gorgeous day.
But even those guys need a little bit. You pull it back a little bit with them.
Sure
But
do.
you feel that, right? Someone's grumpy and then you're like, hey, yeah, have a great day. And then they change and then it starts to come back and forth in this flow of juicy goodness. But yeah, don't linger too long at strangers.
No.
At the
That gets to
shopping
this freaky level, doesn't it? But we are discussing the importance of connection and building relationships with children. But I feel like as a society collectively, we still need to remember that when we're building adult relationships and maintaining those relationships, that connection is the key for all relationship building.
Connection is the key. Funnily enough, again, I've been in business for a long time, and I often say the biggest myth in business is the phrase, it's just business.
No.
It's so not true. It's all relationship. Even in the businessy or most businessy business, packing shelves or factories, lines, all of it's about relationship and relationships with suppliers and relationships with your team and relationships with the people on the floor doing the work. It's a big deal. And yeah, just in our daily life. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're in an age where everyone's connected via social media, and it's not quite right. It's actually, we're not actually connected in a way that resonates with that mind-to-mind oxytocin fueled connection. So yeah, connecting with humans is kind of important.
Is key. You mentioned, I'm going to jump into another topic I wanted to mention, is private practice. And in allied health, we see lots of clients with behaviors, and it does play a toll on our emotional well-being and our mental well-being at some time. And in my field, I've known many therapists that have closed their businesses because of burnout. Now, you use this beautiful phrase, is let's reframe the burnout to burning in. And starting my own business, I've reframed with how can I reduce the burnout, but focus on the passion and supporting my values and my why to continue running the business. Can you elaborate that, especially with you've been in the business for such a long time? Or the
Yeah, so I
industry,
had
sorry.
this. Yeah, I've had this concept for a while, and I have to give credit to a wonderful OT, Rhiannon Crisp. And I'd seen an Instagram post that she'd put in where she said the phrase burn in. And I said, can I steal that? That explains everything I've been trying to say for so long. And so the idea is, all right, burnout is a big deal. I do think, firstly, we need to be careful with our words. Burnout is a real concept that has a real definition that is about like really despair, almost depression, lack of empathy, not wanting to get up in the morning to go to work, not caring as much about our clients and things. Like it's a bit dark, burnout. So I think a lot of times we say burnout, and we need to be honest, we're not actually burnt out. Maybe we're on the path to that. We're tired. We're overwhelmed. All
Exhausted.
of these
Yeah.
things are real. And if we can get more specific, we can go, all right, I'm tired. I'm going to take a bit of holiday, or I'm going to, I'm going to go get some, I'm going to start to fill my cup with self-care and do these things, or find the ways that I need to do to fill that cup and sort that out. Burnout is it's like the word toxic. They're very
Or
done.
narcissist. Like they're very,
Yeah, they don't give you much
yeah.
room to work on it. They don't give you the specifics of what's going on. So if we can break down the specifics of what's not working for me, then I can start to chip away and create strategies. But it's also this idea of positive psychology is really about focusing on what you want, where we tend to focus on what we think about. And so if we think about burnout, we try not to burn out. We're actually strengthening the neurons related to burnout. And so I remember a lot of people are like, oh, you got to fill your cup. You got to fill your cup. And what I find is a lot of people go, they're hearing my cup is empty. My cup is empty. My cup is empty. And Dostoevsky has this great phrase where he goes, try not to think about a white polar bear for 30 seconds. And that's all you can think about. Right. And so what we focus on is what we think about. Whereas the antidote, I think, is not trying not to burn out. It's about finding ways to burn in. And this isn't toxic positivity. This isn't blind ignoring stuff. Yeah, work out the things that you need to work out, and where you're not actually haven't got your work-life balance and you haven't got things right, and you're burning the candle at both ends. Those things aren't healthy. However, what will sustain us is if we can ignite our passion, our joy, our connection, our compassion. All of these things light us up. Every OT I've ever met, and speechy, I'm sure, got into it because they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to make a difference in the lives of kids and families, or whoever it is that they're working with. That needs to be what your focal point is, because it's like riding a bike. If you're staring at the wheel and pedals, you're going to crash. You need to look forward and look down the road. And it's not ignoring those things. It's not downplaying the real struggle that a lot of people are feeling. And with the NDIS and all these changes, people are feeling a struggle, but mostly people are feeling fear, uncertainty, all these things. So what am I certain about? I'm certain about I want to change lives of kids and families, or I want to be part of that process. I want to support them to grow and change their lives. I can do that if the NDIS is gone. I can do that if OT gets banned. I can do that in a variety of different ways. Those things aren't happening. I know that worst case scenario isn't happening, and I can still do it. I can also, then go, all right, I'm feeling this, so I'm going to get a bit more information. What might these changes be? We don't know the specifics, but I can find out there are some. They want a bit more natural setting. They want their foundational things. So there might be some more group-based things, or there might be like a range of different things they're starting to talk about. And so for me in business, I'm going, well, how can I grow my business in a way that will be a better business and a better service to my families, regardless of whether this change happens? So at the moment, I'll stress out about the actual changes when they come through, but I'm going to get the information. I'm going to start developing how can I make changes that might go that way, but are still going to be useful right now. And then it feels meaningful. It resonates with my vision and values, and it will also help me when those changes come in. So that's a way of sort of being positive, igniting my passion, my vision and values, but not being silly and reading and researching and finding the info.
I love that, because if you have that as a business owner, you actually also support your team. And then when you're supporting your team, you've got the good feels happening there, and then you're continuing to thrive as a business rather than as an individual provider, which I loved about what you said.
You have to support, like I'm scared to say this on something that's going to be in a public forum, but support the people who support the kids, his families, team and community, But funnily enough, for me, I once in an interview, I had someone say, "It sounds like you think you need to support your therapist more than you need to support your clients." And I was like, "Yeah, I do. Like, I actually do." This is the part I'm a little bit scared to say it, but the reality of it is they're the ones supporting the families. So if I have a high turnover of staff, that doesn't support the families. If I have
No.
therapists that have no one to turn to ask questions, that's not supporting the families. So our families have a whole team of OTs that are supporting them because our therapists go back to the staff room, they chat to each other. We all know it. My favorite compliment from a parent is, I just appreciate that when I get to your waiting room, every single team member greets my kid by name. Like,
Oh,
that's
that's
cool,
beautiful.
right?
That's
Because we have each
awesome.
other's
Yeah.
back and we care about what we're doing and we're doing it together. We're not isolated little pods. I mean, that is, again, that is a beauty about being able to work in a clinic setting where you all hang out together all day versus more community work where you're a little more isolated and on the road. And that stuff's not wrong. They're serving a really important purpose. I do think that those practices need to give extra emphasis to figure out how do they connect when they're out and about in regional areas too. It's hard to be isolated. Connection is a glue
The key.
for our team
Yeah.
members. And actually the biggest expense in business is replacing great quality
staff.
team. It's a massive financial cost, but it's also really a massive emotional cost. It's hard
Emotional
to say
cost.
goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah. And because you've built that connection and it's so important as a business owner, but also for your clients. I love that those clients aren't just known as, oh, that's Dave's kid, but hey, that's little Johnny. He's here for his 3:00 session.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I'm sort of verging on the end of the edge of saying to therapists when they start with us, actually, they're not your kids. They're MoveAbout's families, and you're the main therapist. You're the lead therapist. And why I say that to you is that two things. One, you don't have to feel like you have to make it up. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You just make it. If you don't know the answer, you say, "Hey, great question. Let me run it by the team and I'll get back to you." That's the first phrase I teach my therapists because families don't want therapists to can I say a little swear word?
Yeah. 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 That's fine.
Families don't want therapists to bullshit, right? They don't want them to make
No.
stuff up. And just
No.
say, "Great question," or
They
like,
want reality. They want
let
authenticity.
let me chat to my supervisor, or let me chat to the team, or let me do a bit of research, and I'll give you a good answer, an answer that's
Yeah.
actually really gonna be helpful. That's the way to go. And so for our therapists, I say, you don't need to feel you need to do that. Also, you don't get to. You don't get to just make stuff up. You've got all the support in the world here. Use this support. If you still get stuck, pull us in. We'll come and have a look and meet the family ourselves. We do a lot of jumping in sessions and families. We sometimes say families trust the blue shirt, which is the MoveAbout shirt, because they trust that people could cover
The
and
blue
it would
collar
still be
shirt. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's it. And we've got the team behind them. We support the people who support the kids. So important.
Dave, this has been such a wonderful discussion. Firstly, thank you for making such an impact in our industry and working with pediatrics, but also in the world of business with allied health and navigating through NDIS and supporting OTs to be better versions of themselves, but also better clinicians to support the clients to make them better too. So thank you for that. And before we wrap up, thank you for gifting me this wonderful book. I will pass it on to a teacher who I feel would benefit from it. But for anyone interested in purchasing this book, I saw the other day, was it a bestseller on Amazon?
Yeah, you got it before we had the stickers put on them, but I can maybe
Oh.
yeah, it was an Amazon #1 international bestseller. So that
Look at
means it
that.
was the bestseller in its category, in about 11 categories in Australia, but also some categories in the US and Canada. Yeah, so it was a bestseller. That's
Well,
cool.
congratulations. It's definitely making an impact. It made an impact to me, and I know I'm going to pass it on and spread the kindness to another person to help a client or a child in their classroom too. I will put the Amazon link in the show notes and on the Instagram link. If you would like to contact Dave, what's the best way to contact you, Dave?
Yeah, the best way is on our website, moveabout.com.au. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dave Jereb _OT.
I'll tag
And
that in too.
I'm on LinkedIn as well. Can I also do a shout out? We've got a workshop coming up in
Absolutely.
November.
Yes, I did. It's in Hornsby sometimes. Didn't you mention?
Yeah. So it's an old workshop that I used to do that now I've modernized and updated with new information, and it really relates to the book. So it's called Challenging the Story of Behaviour, and it's a one-day workshop in Hornsby, November 21st. It's for parents and professionals. There's a different rate for parents, so we can make it more accessible. But yeah, you can find that on our website too at moveabout.com.au/courses. It will provide you some surprisingly simple approaches to support your kids with challenging behaviors.
I think I asked you this. Is there capacity to watch this online, especially for those that are interstate and they cannot go to Hornsby? Or will it be recorded?
The answer is no, not for
Okay.
this one. But this is it's something that I mean, Hornsby's quite close. It's central for all three of my clinics. So this is the first one. There's a good chance that I'll be in other states next year and other places next year. So no, this one is just
Sparkle
in
your
Hornsby.
magic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh,
And
it's fun to connect in person, right?
absolutely, absolutely. But definitely shout out to the Southwest community. Come down this way and share your goodness here.
Whereabouts are you, Rita?
I'm from Moorebank area.
Okay, you can
So
drive to Hornsby.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'll see. I'll let you know. But Dave, before I finish up, I do this little segment at the end of my podcast where I discuss what's the word of the day that you will use tomorrow to be a better version of yourself.
Oh.
So my word of the day is, I haven't even picked one today. Peace. Have more inner peace, so I'm much calmer for a very busy day tomorrow.
Wow, that's cool. I mean, the cheat one would be connection. That's my word for every day, or oxytocin. I think for me, it might be presence or being present. I've actually just learned how to pause my inbox so that I have several hours a day where I'm not getting incoming mail, just so I can not be so ADHD as is my natural character. So presence or being present. Is that acceptable?
That's a gorgeous word. Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting, all the guests that I've had on, they've all used beautiful adjectives like graceful, presence, warrior, kindness. And it just really depicts what we need as humans. Being present to yourself so you can be present to others, or connecting with yourself so you can connect with others. And it just really reinforces the basics of humanity, really.
Yeah, that's great. Love it.
Yeah. Dave, it has been a pleasure having you on. I guess we can keep talking and talking and talking. Maybe you can come on as a part 2 series of another interesting topic, which would be great to have.
I'd love to come back anytime. Just let me know. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dave. Will you have a gorgeous afternoon? And everybody, please do follow Dave. And if you're interested in his upcoming workshop in Hornsby, the link is all in the notes and on the Instagram link. And have a gorgeous day. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Rita.